Hi, my name is Amanda Panacea, and you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This is a community for self-healers, biohackers, practitioners, and any other helping professionals. You're in the right place if you're seeking conversations about how pain becomes passion, the connection between physical, energetic, mental, and our spiritual self, finding your body's ancient wisdom, the latest biohacking technologies, clinical research, and if you just want to nerd out about complex biochemistry and quantum physics. But this is also for entrepreneurs who seek infinite abundance and a supportive community. So pour a cup of King coffee or Sisters tea and let's join the revolution. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Healer Revolution podcast. I am your host, Amanda Panacea, and today I'm super excited to be chatting with a fellow Instagram friend, Chelsea Haines. Hi, Chelsea. How are you?
Hey, Amanda. So great. So excited to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started, I just want to say congratulations on your first baby. I know how difficult, but also exciting this time period is for you. So I really appreciate your time coming on to chat with me today.
Of course, I'm super grateful that I have the energy to be here again. I've had to pause a lot of things over the last, trimester and a half, and really grateful that I've got the energy and excitement now to be here and to start recording again. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
For sure. Yeah. And before we get into the nitty gritty, just as a background, I've been following you for a really long time. I absolutely love your work because it feels like you have a really good message. Niche wise, you focus on gut health. However, you're not just your average gut health coach. You're not talking protocols. You're not talking about supplements and anything like that. You have a much deeper focus on the things that I have also personally found for myself and then with my clients to be much more effective. And that is that nervous system component, the subconscious programs we're running, and all of that. So I just want to say I appreciate your work, and I would love to know how you got here. Why is this your focus and your passion?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much. Social media is such a funny, weird place, and it's just so nice to genuinely get to connect with people through that app that, turns into meaningful relationships and deeper conversations where hopefully the butterfly effect impacts a lot of people. So I'll give you kind of like the bird's eye view story of it, but kind of like the key benchmarks of what brought me here was my own personal story, as many people I think have a similar experience, but it started in high school. I came from a household that was very, very happy for the first 12 years of my life. And then my dad left. He just left. And my mom had to file bankruptcy. There was so many feelings of abandonment and separation and loss that we experienced all together. And it was, we're going back now, the late 90s, things weren't really talked about, things were just suppressed. And, my way of sort of coping with this overwhelming stress was becoming the high performer, the straight A student, the captain of the sports teams. I was involved in pretty much as many extracurricular activities as I possibly could. And carrying that over into high school, my whole main goal of life was to be worthy on paper and to be accepted into a prestigious college. And I really believed in my heart that that was what was going to make me a success in life. And not only just a success, but actually worthy of safety and love and acceptance, which are the three core pillars that every single human being needs. And since I graduated high school, and going back 20 years, 2004, that's crazy. It's been an unlearning process, over 2 decades of unlearning what it actually means to be worthy of safety and love and acceptance, just as I am, and inherently, without having to do anything to prove myself worthy of those things. And it's been a long journey that included autoimmune disease. And the autoimmune factor absolutely came from a perfect combination of a seriously dysregulated nervous system, this high performing mentality, kind of this boss babe culture, which I too fed into and enjoyed and still do enjoy, just with a different energy now for very, very, very long time. And those things combined with birth control at a very young age and probably lack of micronutrients and just a severe amount of stress in high school. It was, before I was even 18 years old, I was dealing with this, this enormous amount of reflecting back. It was fight or flight. I mean, it was truly my nervous system just in a state of survival for years and years and years. And the way I perceived it at the time, and even, my mentors and teachers and family was, again, this high performer, this person who just does it all. And at the time, I thought I knew everything about the world, and there was nothing that anyone could tell me that would make a difference. And over the last 20 years, it's really been this self-discovery of, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, autoimmunity brought me to the world of gut health. I was very grateful in just after I graduated college, actually, my autoimmune symptoms hit a peak. For me, it manifested as psoriasis. So it was rashes on my skin. And after college, I just was so fed up with dermatologists wanting to push biologics on me. And their only answer was steroid creams. And those were just so temporary. And every time I stopped using them, the rashes would come back with a vengeance, and then dealing with steroid cream withdrawal. And it was just this terrible cycle. And I found a naturopathic doctor back in 2008 who put me on a gut healing protocol. And there were no supplements involved. It was all food-based. It was an inflammatory elimination protocol, and it changed my life. And here we are now, 2024, doing the damn thing. And the long road of all of that, which also included my own journey of marriage and divorce pretty young, and getting remarried, and now a baby on the way. So yeah. And of course, also, I guess the last layer of that is launching my own business and really being faced with all of these high performing tendencies again, but then trying to, do it in a different way or bring a different energy forward and really walk my talk in the sense of being able to show up in the world in a way that I feel proud of, and that my body is not wreaking havoc on itself.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And we actually have a lot in common. I didn't even know, I didn't even realize. Definitely struggle with the high performance, but I always thought like I was just better than other people at having a lot of energy, or being more focused, or I could sleep for 4 hours and I didn't need to sleep for 8 hours. Not in like a moral better than other people sense. I just thought like, oh, this is my superpower. Like I have really good stamina and I can tolerate this, and I'm stronger than most people. So it kind of fed into that identity, which then just snowballed it even worse. So then you're constantly chasing after the next thing you have to prove to yourself that you can do. And then when you can't do it, then there's the guilt and the shame and who am I? And
Yeah.
all that self-worth stuff comes up. And then also, with your story about your skin, that in college is when I first started developing eczema as well, during that time period of maybe separation from my friends, my family, my hometown. And then it went away for 15 years before I developed it again, which is interesting through that lens of German new medicine, which I know you're very into as well.
Yes, it's crazy. And psoriasis too, for me, it's something that I still deal with every now and again. And, especially when faced with those separation conflicts, right? When they pop up, it's this constant having to remind my nervous system and remind my brain that we are safe, and that this protective strategy is an old strategy. So if you're listening to this, I've never heard of German new medicine. Yeah, it's a map. That's how I explain it to people. It's essentially a map of the psyche's relationship to the body. And when our psyche experiences trauma and certain conflicts, is what we call them, the body responds. And it's a really empowering way to start looking at our symptoms, because I deal with a lot of people who've dealt with chronic symptoms for a very, very, very long time and have done all the things, right? This was kind of my journey and my path as well. It sort of gotten to a point with autoimmunity where it got so much better to a certain point. And then it kind of started like rearing its head again. And it's funny, even in pregnancy, I have people say, well, in pregnancy, all of my symptoms went away. The hormones, the estrogen, the progesterone, all my inflammatory symptoms went away. I had no more issues. And that has not really been the case for me. And I really, it's almost validation and knowing like this is not just a functional thing.
Yeah.
Like this really is so much deeper. And it's when there is a flare up, when my body is reacting, it is so in direct correlation to some type of conflict that I'm experiencing. And my deeper work now is to really get down to those like super subtle layers of my psyche, to rewire the brain and go, okay, like this is stressful, and you can handle stress without having to respond in a physical manner this way. Now,
Hmm.
the body always does respond in a physical manner. And I think that's another helpful way of looking at chronic symptoms. If you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, but I've dealt with chronic blow or, thyroid issues or weight issues or whatever it may be, it's when we start looking at the body as more than just functional, it actually becomes really empowering, because now we can say, all right, we're not just having to be reliant. And we always say at my company, Gut Health Agency, we say, bless that medicine. So we are not anti-medicine. And, if the medicine is suppressing everything, then as soon as you try to come off of that medicine and those symptoms come rearing their head, then there's something else there. And I would encourage you to get curious about that, right? So that's what I love about German New Medicine, is because it's not necessarily a healing modality, which is very different than a lot of the things that you find online these days are sort of like, this modality and that modality, and this is how you heal your nervous system, and this is how you find the answers to this. But German New Medicine is actually just a map. It's for you to
Hmm.
be able to heal yourself. And sometimes that knowledge alone is all that you need to, you hear these stories of people spontaneously healing cancer and healing tumors, and you think, oh, well, this is just random. It's just a random thing, like a miracle has occurred. And it's like,
Yeah.
yes, we can look at the body as miraculous. I do, and I do think there are miracles that happen, but the miracle is that it's not random.
Yes.
And that actually maybe you've discovered something in your psyche without even realizing it that was the source of that thing that was growing the tumor, the inflammation, the reaction. The source of that in the first place. Once you've discovered it, the body can immediately shift into rest and digest, your parasympathetic state, and go, oh, we're safe now. We don't have,
Yes.
we don't have to, we don't have to respond this way anymore.
Right. And I think that when people go digging for like, oh, I've got to find all of the conflicts
Mm,
that started all these programs, these are adaptations to your life and how you're perceiving your life, right?
yes, yes.
But something you said earlier, coming from highly dysregulated nervous system, where I kind of view that lens as like, if your nervous system is on in hypervigilance and sympathetic, more things will appear to be stressful, or more things will appear to be something you have to survive. Like
Yeah.
we'll start to be almost paranoid, Oh no,
Mm-hmm.
that's coming to get me. Oh no, this was someone attacking me. And so then you will be running multiple programs.
Mm-hmm.
So German New Medicine, it definitely is like the map to finding those things, but the key is not just to go filter through every conflict you've ever been through, right?
Yeah, because then you become hyper vigilant, right? You become
Yeah.
obsessed. And this is the other like flip side of the coin, that most of the women who finally make their way to the Gut Health Agency have done all the things already.
Yeah.
And it's on one hand, it's a relief, like, yay, you finally made it here. Like now we can do the real work. But then it's also so unfortunate for me, 'cause, you've spent time and money and energy in all these different things. And now you're so obsessed with the toxic world that we're living in and the toxic people that are in your life and your moldy home and your, just, I mean, it's never ending. And I always like to say, and this is such a good point that you made, Amanda, like the more hypervigilant you become, the more sensitive you become. So it's actually about becoming resilient and building physical and emotional resiliency to the stressors in life. I've actually met clients who have worked with some German new medicine practitioners, and there's different mindsets about different things. My personal belief is a little bit different. And I've had a client come to me and she said, well, this one coach said that she wouldn't work with me until I quit my job and I moved homes. Like, well, yes, in a perfect world, we could just eliminate all the triggers of our life. Like, wouldn't that be great if we could just, live where we want to live, work where we want to work, and only be around the people, we could put ourselves in this non-toxic, beautiful bubble. And wouldn't that be wonderful? Yes, it would. But it is not realistic in any way, shape, or form. And what a stressful thing to go, oh my gosh, I'm so broken. I'm so diseased, I'm so triggered that the only way I can heal myself is if I move my house and I quit my job.
Right.
Like that, what a disempowering belief and disempowering mindset. And I personally believe that we are all capable of building resiliency. And of course, I'm not talking about if you're in an abusive situation. If there's an active abuser in your life and somebody who is actively harming you in some way, I mean, that is a very different situation than being in a stressful job situation, right? And we all perceive all these things very differently. So you as the person who's on a self-healing journey has to determine, like, is this person actually abusing me, or is there some like self-resiliency that I can work on here to make this boss who's annoying me not quite so stressful for me all the time, right?
Yeah.
It's two different scenarios. But I truly believe that every single human can heal themselves. And this is a foundational belief that I've had even about myself. And I just never fed into the belief that autoimmunity was my body attacking itself. I never have believed that. It never landed for me in my heart as truth. And I'm grateful for that. Like, I don't know where that came from. God, maybe, I don't know, stubbornness, right? Maybe I'm a Capricorn, I'm a Pitta, I'm very fiery. Maybe there was just like I got to prove this world wrong. Like, there's no way that the body that is created so perfectly and can co-create another human being like magic is attacking itself. Like, that doesn't make sense. So yeah, I feel like there's ways to build that resiliency, and there's ways to find what it is in your body that is confused, or where it is where your body is feeling hypervigilant and stuck in that sympathetic fight or flight state. Because when your body is focusing on fighting the world, it's impossible to focus on healing yourself. It doesn't compute. It doesn't work. The actual mechanisms in your body and in your gut health shut down when your nervous system is perceiving threat. So if we can perceive safety, then that's when things really start to shift. And all of this has to happen on a subconscious level too in our brain.
Yep, totally agree. And we kind of mentioned already tracks triggers. Something that I feel probably you see every day over and over again in your gut healing world is a tracker, a trigger being the food that they're eating.
Yes.
And they're taught, this is toxic, I'm allergic, I can't have this, I can't digest this.
Yes. Oh man. I had to have a sip of my coffee here because this is it gives me goosebumps. My absolute greatest joy in what I do now is to see somebody who comes to me and saying, I can only eat 2 foods. And I've done the food sensitivity tests, and all the foods that I was eating are foods that I'm sensitive to. And then 6 months after our VIP program, this person has reintroduced 37 food groups. and they go out to eat without fearing eating anything, and they're having zero symptoms. I mean, it is, which has happened. I actually have a testimony pinned on my Instagram page. I mean, it lights me up so much, because this is the proof that what led you down this rabbit hole in the first place was good intentions of, and this was my story too, right? Well, I must be allergic to something. And, that first naturopath put me on an anti-inflammatory protocol, which does have value in the short term, right? It's like, if a house is on fire, you have to put the fire out. And, eliminating certain things for short periods of time can be helpful in very, dare I say, rare circumstances. And, let's talk about like the big ones, gluten, right? If you are not celiac, and this is, it's very much a spectrum, right? But if you are not celiac and you have gluten sensitivity, I guarantee that there are things that we can do on a functional level, again, to build your gut's resilience to that food. And if we only do that, and we don't look at the fear and the stress response that your body goes into every time you go near a piece of bread, again, your body is going danger, 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 danger. All of your defense mechanisms go on high alert. I just binge watched all of Game of Thrones. So I'm picturing the Unsullied, right? I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones fan. It's like, the best warriors out there, and they just stand in attention, and whew, they all stand up in a line, and they all put their shields up. This is what's happening in preparation for the battle. You're not even in battle yet, and they are on high alert. And you're like, damn, those dudes know what they're doing. Like, they are ready for fighting, right? The same thing's happening in our body before we even eat. So then we eat with this anticipation of feeling sick, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's literally a track that we are now stepping on, because we believe that we're going to have symptoms every single time we eat this, which becomes true because our nervous system goes, oh, danger, danger, danger. So the functional aspect does have to happen. And this is why, we call our program a bum up and a brain down approach, right? Like, we got to focus, we got to look at what's happening in your colon, in your intestines, in your pancreas. Like, we have to look at how well is your gut actually functioning? And are there things that we can do to support the actual mechanical and chemical digestion that your gut should be doing, but isn't doing because your nervous system is just too busy perceiving threat and, lining up your unsullied soldiers all the time? So I call it like backdoor tricks, right? This is an adult conversation, FYI. I'm going to talk about sex for a second. Certain things that can help chemical and mechanical digestion, for example, like utilizing digestive bitters before a meal. I always say this is like the lube before sex, right? It's like sometimes you just need a little help. And that's okay, because then it makes the experience so much more pleasurable, right? It's like, I don't want anyone shoving anything in any orifice of mine if I'm not wet and turned on first. And the same thing goes for my mouth and my digestion. Like, I'm sure you can all relate to that feeling of being stressed and on the go, right? I mean, yeah, it's one thing in the bedroom, right? To be like, I'm just like, not like, I want this, but my body's not really wanting this right now. I need a little help, right? Same thing with food. You're stressed, you're on the go, you're in between meetings. Your nervous system is worried about lining up the soldiers, and it's not at all worried about getting your digestive juices going, starting with saliva in your mouth, stomach acid in your stomach, enzymes being produced, liver and gallbladder support, with bile being produced and sent out at the right times. So using tools like supplements, which are supplementary to all the other things, can and are very, very helpful for short periods of time, kind of just like eliminating certain inflammatory foods for very short periods of time, which we don't even really do that anymore. Unless a GI map comes back and says, like, yeah, your inflammatory markers are like really through the roof. Let's just like give your gut an opportune environment to heal,
Mhm.
because it will if we put the fire out. We have to look at the psyche side of it, because if you continue to believe that gluten is your worst enemy, except for when you're in Italy on vacation, like why? And yeah, sure, we can blame the pesticides, but at the end of the day, like Europe uses pesticides too. I hate to break it to y'all, but
Yeah.
like, Europe is also a very first world, high productive. I mean, unless you're in a really, really small town somewhere and you see the wheat growing and you see how they're producing it and it's hand crushed and which, yeah, that might exist on a tiny little village in Sicily somewhere, maybe, but like mass produced flour is still mass produced. Like there are
Mhm.
still things, but the difference is your belief about it.
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, well, I'm in Europe and you're on vacation and your nervous system is feeling good and you're
Yep.
probably getting 20,000 steps a day because you're walking around seeing all these sights in the sunshine in the med in the summertime. You're not sitting sedentary, stressed out about the sandwich that you're about to eat. It's a very different
Exactly.
experience.
Yeah. And this is why I love your approach, because I agree there's no harm in supporting the body
Right.
in given a little nudge, like herbs or
Mhm.
homeopathy, or
Yep.
the actual nutrients that our organs need to function,
Yep.
which we're all super deficient in so many these days.
Yep.
So there's no harm in that as long as you're doing both things together to help to recognize, oh, okay, I'm starting to notice that when I have this stress that day or have these types of thoughts, the outcome is this. I need more of maybe the herbs the day that I have to go into work and commute. And then the days I don't really need them. I kind of forget about them, and just starting to notice those patterns. Because,
Yes.
like you said, the food can be the track or the trigger
Hmm.
itself, thinking, oh, I'm allergic. Oh, I can't digest it. I got histamine issues, whatever your story is. But the food can also be a track or a trigger for another stressor that may have been just present. Let's say you were eating that sandwich in Italy, everything was going amazing. And then somebody came and hit you with a car.
Yeah.
You were in this traumatic accident, you had to go to hospital, you didn't know where you were on vacation, you didn't have health insurance. It was very
Yep.
scary, and started a program. And then that conflict, now you can't eat bread, or now you
Yeah.
can't eat salami or whatever was on the sandwich.
This was actually the exact story of the gal I just mentioned who reintroduced 37 foods.
Mm-hmm.
She was actually on a hike with her boyfriend when it all started. And these are things that like you don't connect until you sit down with someone and you start connecting the dots. And
Mm-hmm.
this was such an eye-opening session for her. And I said, well, we're kind of digging into like, where did this all begin? Like you're way down this rabbit hole. Let's bring it back. And she said, well, actually, I remember it started, my boyfriend and I were on a hike and something happened with him where he went into an anaphylactic reaction to something that they ate. And because they were out in the, it gives me goosebumps. They were out in the middle of nowhere on this hike in the woods, and he stopped breathing. And it
Wow.
was so traumatic for her. He ended up being okay. They were able to get help, but it was like such a severe response for her in that moment that her fear of that happening to her became so severe that she developed this perpetual food sensitivity. And I want to make sure I'm clear about this. Your symptoms are very, very, very real.
Yes.
So don't confuse like, okay, oh, this is all in my head. I think actually we can say that term and it be a very empowering thing rather than a very dismissing statement, and think, well, it's coming from your nervous system, which actually is controlled by your brain and your head. But the body's responses to it are very, very real. So your reactions are, your sensitivity to these foods is a very real thing. But if we look at the source of that sensitivity, what was it? What triggered this thing for your body to go into this fight or flight, unsullied shields up kind of visual every time you eat this food? And for her, it was a very specific memory and a very specific moment where she went, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I've never made this connection before.
Yeah.
And we did a subconscious session on it. And that was, I mean, that opened the door to her being able to heal. And it was a slow process, right? Because you have to take it bit by bit and one by one. But we said, all right, well, let's start with the food that you miss the most. What's the food that you like haven't been able to eat and you absolutely miss the most? And I think it was peanut butter for her, because maybe it was nuts that they were eating on the trail that day. And she's like, she popped in her journal later that day. You know, I ate a peanut butter sandwich today, and it was the best thing I've ever had in my life, and I have zero symptoms. It's like,
Wow.
yes, amazing.
Yeah. So before we get into some of this, like how do we work
Yeah.
on our subconscious? I'd like to point out that everybody has their blind spots.
Yeah.
So I have to work with someone else for them to point out my blind spots. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've had that experience
Yep.
too. It doesn't matter how much you learn, how many techniques you've done,
Yep.
how many people you've worked with personally. It's really hard to see your own shit.
Yes. It's like we laugh too at the gut health agencies. You know, we literally and figuratively have to dig through our own shit. And it's a lot easier to do that when someone's on the other side coaching you through it, you know, holding a loving, curious mirror to your own processes. And oh yeah, I mean, I'm never without support of some kind because,
Mhm.
you know, the work, you do get to a point in the self-development journey, I think, where you go, okay, at least for me, I had to get to a point where I allowed myself, or I had to force myself to step off of that hypervigilant train and, you know, allow my lifestyle to become a walking example of self-development rather than constantly consuming
Mhm.
information. And part of that was working with a coach going, you know, so how are you embodying this today? You know, it's getting out
Yeah.
of our head and getting into our body more often than we are accustomed to being. And yeah, having someone supporting you along that way is, it shortens the learning curve, right? It's like,
Yes.
man, if I had had my program 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't be dealing with what I'm dealing with, right? So it's like, you know, what you can do in 6 months may save you the next 6 years of your life. And for a lot of people, especially when it comes to gut health stuff, you know, those indigestible morsels in life are just, ugh, they come in all shapes and forms, and then it becomes chronic very quickly. And it's a very sensitive topic because it's a very vulnerable situation. You know, you find yourself nervous to try new things or to go to new places or to meet new people or to be outside of your own comfort zone for fear of what's going to happen to my belly. Am I even going to feel good? And for a lot of people, you know, the last however many decades of their life, they've been dealing with these kinds of things. And it's like, man, if we could just have a really focused path for 6 months, like what would be possible? What type of life could you be experiencing if you were not experiencing these symptoms every single day?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shortening the learning curve is big for me.
Yes, I know. That's one of the things that I love about just social media is
Mhm.
the amount of incredible programs out there.
Yes,
Like
yes,
I am a perpetual course buyer. Like when I see someone with a cool course, I buy it. I
yes.
probably spend most of my money on continuing education.
Oh yeah, which is great because it's also a business write-off, right?
Yep,
But you know,
that
then I
too.
think it, you know, it also does kind of get to that fine point, right? Where it's like, as human beings, our souls want to expand. Like we
Hmm.
constantly want to develop. We desire to learn more. You know, we desire to be better than who we are now, today, right? It's like this natural inclination to want to grow.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where also that fine line of like, what are you consuming every single day? Can, you know, it goes beyond just food. It goes beyond
Right.
just, you know, what you're eating every day, but what are you consuming that's actually triggering your nervous system? And yeah, I love how we have infinite knowledge at our fingertips. And I think sometimes, a lot of times, we need to be redirected to the knowledge that we already have in our body, in our heart, and like reconnecting to that understanding that, like, yes, you can trust your body's processes and, you know, silly little things. I had someone come to me the other day and said, well, you know, I'm feeling really, really jittery, but you know, I'm drinking like 6 cups of coffees a day. Do you think I should pull back? And I just kind of giggled. I looked, this is one of my clients. I looked at her and she goes, yeah, don't answer that. I already know the answer.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Right.
like sometimes we need permission from someone else to listen to our own intuition, and that can be valid and helpful. But, I think
Hmm.
being able to trust yourself along the process, which is also extremely empowering, because then it's like, oh, cool. Now I'm at a place where I can learn more and I can take these courses from a genuine place of curiosity and interest versus like, I'm struggling and I need someone to fix me. There's
Yeah.
two very different energies behind that.
Right. That's exactly what I wanted to mention next. The energy you bring with what you're learning. Are you hoping that you just learned something and automatically like, oh, I didn't know that, this supplement was the answer. Now I'm healed. Are you looking for that silver bullet, or are you just gathering information to see like how it feels in my body? Do I resonate with this practice? Do I resonate with that practice?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned you mentioned doing like subconscious technique yourself. So, sometimes we have to try some of those things to see if we like them. Because when
Yeah.
everyone's saying everybody has to do DNRS and you start to
Mm-hmm.
listen to it and you're like, I think I'm going to fall asleep. I don't think I can listen to this.
Yes. Yeah. You have to find your own path, right? You have to
Hmm.
explore, you have to figure out what modalities and tools work for you, and I think that's also part of the exciting thing about, being on the internet is, I mean, there's always going to be a piece of us that just wishes there was an easy button,
Yeah, of course.
right? And I think that's, a part of one of the core pillars of what we do at the Gut Health Agency is like we've tried to make this as easy as a button as possible. Like we're not gonna make you do things that you don't want to do. As long as you're willing to show up, that's like the minimum. Just show up.
Hmm.
Show up and commit to showing up for yourself. Because that's, if you don't show up, well, then there's not much that, you know, purchasing a course just to have it collect dust on your hard drive. I mean, that's not gonna work. But but showing up and even if it's 50%, you're still going to reap some benefits. And I think part of that process is just getting curious about your own experience, right? And not judging yourself for it, but rather just continuing to come back to, oh, how interesting. There's that habit
Right.
again, or there's that desire again. How interesting. How can I make this work for me rather than work against me? And it's the same thing, the energy that we bring, pardon me, that we bring forward into all of our lives. It's the same thing with gut health and how we're eating. This is like, I always say it doesn't matter what you're eating, it's how you're eating it. And when people come to us, sometimes they're anxious, they're nervous, they don't want to go on another diet, they don't want to, and we do encourage people to food journal. And I always say this, like, we do not care what you're eating, like at all. The more honest you are with us, the more we can help you connect the dots. And what I care more about is rating your stress levels while you're eating, what you're actually feeling and thinking while you're eating, and your hunger and fullness scale. How hungry were you before? How full were you after? That's what I care about more than what's actually on your plate, at least to start. Because if we focus on the food only, it's just another diet, and it's not going to
Yeah.
stick, and it's going to feel really gross. And the energy behind it is very different than curious.
Hmm.
If the energy behind anything that you're doing is judgmental and not curiosity, then well, it's probably not going to stick.
Right. Yeah, agreed. And so we've been talking maybe like 45 minutes. We haven't even talked about probiotics, parasites, fungal overgrowth.
Mhm. None of it. None of
Literally
it.
almost nothing that has to do with.
It's true. And this is why we do functional gut testing, right? We do a
Hmm.
GI map stool test because here's the thing. If there's something gone awry in your gut, if you've got parasites that are in there and thriving, if you've got candida overgrowth and it's just completely taken over your entire microbiome, if you have zero bile being produced, or if you had your gallbladder removed, like that's something we need to look at. If you have zero digestive enzymes and your pancreas is underproducing, like we have to look at those things.
Right.
And that's kind of where like putting the fire out and using supplements to go, okay, like what specific targeted things can we do to help put this fire out so you're not like actively dealing with chronic yeast infections anymore, or rashes on your skin, or an itchy bum at night all the time. Like how do we ease your symptoms, because we do believe in symptom management, because we don't believe that you should have to suffer on the journey to healing.
Right.
But how can we ease your symptoms whilst still promoting healing? Because the bigger question is, why are those parasites thriving? We've all been exposed to parasites. We've all eaten raw lettuce before, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then, the irony of wanting to eat organic vegetables, but then also not wanting parasites. It's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. Like we are microorganisms, and that's okay. Like we are viruses, we are bacteria, we are made of bugs, and bugs can be a part of that healthy ecosystem. But when it starts to become a problem is when those, what we call opportunistic bacteria or organisms, start to take over your bigger, or so like when your terrain of your body starts to become more dark water than clear water, right? I think of like the fish in the fish tank, right? It's like when the environment of your body starts to be overrun and overtaken from these things, we have to address those things. But then we have to look at, okay, once we address them, and this is for anyone who's like, well, I've done the 6-month protocols, and as soon as I stopped doing it, I got sick again and it all came back. Well, because you didn't address why your body was weak enough for those organisms to thrive in the first place. And that is where the nervous system and subconscious work have to come into play, because we have to build your body's resiliency. We have to build your gut's ability to be stronger than what it was before, because after you get off those supplements, you're going to go back into the world and it's going to be just as stressful as it was before. But now if you have, the ability to put your emotional shield up, or you've rewired your brain to perceive safety in those previously stressful situations, now your body can fight off if you happen to swallow a parasite eating salmon at some point, because it's going to happen, right? It does.
Right.
It's okay.
Right. Yeah. I always say there's a time and a place to address pathogens, and then there's a bigger time and a place to prevent them, either before or after. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
it's got to be both. It's got to be bi-directional.
Yeah. And I know German new medicine has different feelings on it, and different practitioners have different approaches, but
Yeah.
I personally believe in the value to symptom management, because symptoms themselves can also become tracks.
Yes.
It's like if you're constantly dealing with acid reflux, and I'll give you a personal example, psoriasis, right? Psoriasis as a track can very quickly turn into a self-devaluation conflict, because it's a very vulnerable, it's a very out in the open, everyone can see it. It's often in areas of your body that are very sensitive and just out there. A lot of people deal with it on their elbows and the back of their scalps. At least for me, that was if I wore my hair in a ponytail, it'd be like, oh, you have a rash on your scalp. I'm like, yeah, thanks, I know. Like it can become this like thing that you obsess and think about all the time. And also people have no people say and do whatever they want. So now all of a sudden this rash becomes this self-devaluation conflict, which eventually leads to arthritis. And this is what, Western doctors will say, well, that psoriatic arthritis is just a progression of your autoimmune disease. I personally, I started getting symptoms of psoriasis in high school. I told you, over 20 years ago. I've never dealt with psoriatic arthritis ever. And I've never been on biologics, and I've never suppressed my immune system. And I 100% believe that's because I never perceived it as a self-devaluation. I always approached it from a different mindset, right? So it's all about perception. But for other people who perceive things differently, and chronically now their psoriasis becomes a track for self-devaluation conflict, then you're going to be experiencing joint issues and psoriatic arthritis issues, which is another track, a separate track in and of itself. So just to kind of like put a pretty bow on all that. So I do believe in symptom management as a healthy aspect and part of the healing journey. And that also includes, you know, chronic bloat and explosive diarrhea and chronic constipation and parasites, right? Because none of that is fun. And if you're unable to be intimate with somebody else because you're so afraid of going on a date and then being intimate with them after and flatulence or whatever might happen, you know, you might not feel good, then that's not going to be supportive of, at least in my mind's eye, that's not going to be supportive of your self-healing journey. You know,
Right.
we want you to feel comfortable getting out there in the world and exploring new things as you experience healing too. We don't want you to have to wait to experience life.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially because, I'm sure you're um, feeling very similar. When you're trying to figure out your subconscious beliefs, tune into your body, listen to what it needs.
Mhm.
And this is a 180 from anything you've ever done before. That takes so much practice. And it's not just like, oh, I know that I had this one traumatic event and now my conflict is resolved. It's usually decades of how you've been perceiving yourself and the world. And
Mhm.
that stuff takes years to unravel. And
Yeah.
why would you sit there suffering, judging
Mhm.
yourself for not figuring it out yet, having all the
Yes.
shame of being like, well, I can't even do my subconscious rewiring correctly,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
perfectionism,
Yes. And
perfectionism. So yeah.
yep, I personally experienced that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's such a valid point, you know, especially in working with certain German new medicine practitioners, and I've explored many, and they're
Hmm.
all wonderful in their own means, but you know, again, some it's sort of like, well, no, you either you have to stop using your steroid creams today, otherwise this work isn't going to work. And it's like, well,
Hmm.
you know, and I felt grateful that I put myself in a position where I was able to stop using, and not that I never used steroid creams. I never abused them. I never used them because I was so afraid of having steroid cream withdrawal and have it
Hmm.
be worse. But, you know, there's definitely still times where I'll have a big flare up and I will use a tiny, tiny little bit of steroid cream just to help put that flame out. And I really struggled for a short period of time there where it's like, gosh, am I resetting my whole healing journey? And am I like, you know, really messing up this healing phase? And am I interrupting this healing and it's going to come back with a vengeance? I had to just really make the decision to put all that aside because the amount of suffering that I was experiencing, my own internal suffering, like you said, it's that high performer, like, oh my gosh, well, I was told that if I use this cream, it's going to interrupt all the work that I've done.
Hmm.
And I just don't believe that anymore. No, I just don't. And
Yeah.
yes, there's definitely times where I can see like if I've had a really big flare up and I just can't deal with it at the moment, I'll use a little bit of cream. And then I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I think I can go back and deal with these emotions. And I stop using the cream and then it does flare up again. It's like I anticipated that. I knew that was going to happen. Like I knew that I had suppressed that healing phase for that short period of time, but I
Hmm.
don't believe that I've gone backwards on this journey. You know, it was
Yeah.
like I needed that symptom management for that short period of time to get me through because there was a lot going on. And now I have more capacity to be able to look at this from a subconscious perspective now, too. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
I
And
agree.
as someone who was injured and went through steroid withdrawal, I still, even after that, used medications for
Hmm.
the time period where I was like, I can't function. You know,
Yes. And bless that
they're,
medicine, right? Like, bless it.
yeah.
Thank God for it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And needing that in the moment, I made sure not to feel the shame or the guilt because I think one of the reasons I did experience steroid withdrawal from it was just 12 days of oral prednisone, so a very short time, was because I was like, I don't want to take this. I'm just taking this because everyone keeps telling me to do it because everyone thinks
Mhm.
that my alternative medicine is BS and
Yep.
that I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm going to prove them wrong and show them how toxic this medicine is.
Mm.
And that was my subconscious program. And my body was like,
Yep.
okay, here we go.
Here we go. That's so funny. I did that once as a kid. Different situation, but this is there's something to that. I wanted to
Yeah.
prove to my friends that we were out playing in the yard and climbing on a rock, and they didn't believe that that leaf was poison ivy. And sure enough, I was the one that was going to prove to them that it was poison ivy. And Amanda, do you know how I did that?
You rubbed it all over yourself.
I rubbed it on pardon me, my fucking face. I rubbed it on my face. I was so sick. I was so, I had to get I had to get a steroid shot in my butt as like I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe I was in 5th grade, and I was so embarrassed. I told my mom that I fell into a patch of
Oh,
poison ivy because I could not admit that it was like, nope, I was here to prove to people that that was poison ivy because no one believed me.
yeah.
And sure enough, the next time I saw those friends, they were like, oh, yeah, that's poison
That's
ivy.
so funny. And they were probably like, we knew it was. We just wanted to see if you do that.
And they probably didn't even think, like, they probably didn't even remember, to be honest. Like, it was like they probably didn't even, here I am suffering for weeks and weeks and weeks just to prove myself right. And it's like, they're like, well, that was stupid.
Yes.
But
And so
no, but
on, oh, go ahead.
then the medicine itself can also become a track. And that's all I was going to say.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder sometimes, like, if the steroid withdrawals that I experience too, sometimes is because I'm feeling resistant. Zoom agrees. Because I'm feeling resistant to the medicine itself, it's like, well, have I created a track around this? So a lot of it involves, emotional reduction, emotional response reducing processes and practices to this thing, and then rewiring my beliefs and just embracing and accepting and actually truly blessing that medicine while I'm using it and accepting it as a form of help, which I've struggled with in the past, and thinking, you know what, like this is a good thing. This is helping me. This is I can receive this and accept this for what it is and for the time that I need it, and I can allow it to not have long-term impacts. Uh, Sometimes it works, sometimes it always does. It doesn't. Well, it's like the subconscious does its own thing.
Yes, very well said. So tell us a little bit about the subconscious rewiring technique that you use that you're trained in.
Definitely. So it's called Orpheus Mind Technologies. And the founder has a really interesting background. Actually, he was a computer programmer, like a computer scientist, and then became a psychologist and specifically a trauma-informed therapist, working with people with severe trauma. And his personal experience had to do with his wife who had a liver diagnosis. She needed a liver transplant. And basically those 3 aspects of his life, his background in computer science, his background in trauma-informed therapy, and then this personal, life-threatening situation, he created Orpheus Mind Technologies. And what it actually is around 12 to 13-minute audio tracks that you listen to. And the audio tracks combine familiar therapies. So things like EMDR, trauma therapy, is one of the best researched and studied therapies for trauma. Eye desensitization, EMDI movement, DR desensitization, whatever it stands for.
Reprocessing. Yeah.
There you go, reprocessing. Thank you. Neurolinguistic programming. So there is an aspect of like subconscious hypnosis and adding in positive affirmations in the background. Emotional freedom technique tapping, where EFT tapping uses meridian points. Orpheus therapy doesn't, but it does the bilateral stimulation, utilizing tapping your fingers. So similar to where EMDR is the bilateral stimulation of the brain using your eyes to look back and forth, this is just tapping of your hands back and forth. But then it also has its own element to it as well. And that has to do with the computer programming aspect of it, where he kind of took his knowledge of the brain and the knowledge of computers and say, all right, how can we use technology to be able to rewire the brain back to safety? And, it has to do with like the cadence and the timing of the sounds that you're listening to. And similar to EMDR, where you go into it feeling worked up, it's amazing the relief that you feel in 12 minutes. And have you ever listened to The Body Keeps the Score? Or I say listen to, I listen to audiobooks oftentimes.
Yeah.
It's a book. Have you read The Body Keeps the Score or heard of it?
I'm more of an audiobook person too.
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I love it. So what I love about that book is it's quite dense, but it also is essentially a scientific map and explanation of PTSD and what happens in the brain when someone is experiencing a traumatic flashback. And what he explains in that book is that there's an area of the brain called the Broca's area. And the Broca's area is actually what's in charge of taking thoughts and forming it into words. And this is why, if someone has a seizure in that area of the brain, they may struggle to speak, they may struggle to formulate words. And when we are in a flashback or a traumatic situation, and our body is actually, our nervous system is shifted into fight or flight, Broca's area has less blood flow to it. So, and they've seen this on MRI scans with patients who are currently actively in a traumatic flashback. And this is so interesting because I always compare it to like when you're in an argument and then 2 hours later, you have those thoughts and feelings of, oh, I should have said this, or why didn't I say that, or why didn't I think of this at the time? That's because literally your body was perceiving threat, your brain was shutting down Broca's area and prioritizing survival versus cognition and speech. 2 hours later, now your body's shifted hopefully back into a parasympathetic rest and digest state. More blood flow goes back to Broca's area, and now essentially your brain is back online again, and you can think clearly again. And it's, oh, coulda, shoulda, woulda, put these thoughts into these words, which at the time you literally couldn't do it. Which I know for me personally, it's given me a lot of, oh, that makes a lot of sense for me, where I used to be really frustrated at that. I'm not witty enough. I'm not smart enough. Like when I get into these situations, why can't I keep up with, these other people? And it's just a trauma brain, basically.
Mhm.
So what Orpheus does is it essentially, when you're in that triggered state, it helps to bring blood flow back to those areas of the brain that have turned off. And you're rewiring essentially, neurons that wire together, fire together, wire together, right? You have a trigger and you have a response in your brain, and then your brain literally wires those neurons together. And there's examples of this that you can see online, right? Where you actually see brain neurons coming together. And what Orpheus helps you do is it breaks those old pathways and creates new ones. And what I love about the brain is, and this is also a reminder for anyone who's experienced trauma or who's dealing with chronic symptoms, is that we can heal just as quickly as we became traumatized. So if you think about like that moment in your life when everything changed, just as quickly you can unlearn that. Because of course, why not? Right? Like if just as quickly the brain can perceive danger and we can experience a conflict and then send signals to the body of danger and the reoccurring or the cascade of issues that happen after we perceive this trauma, we can relearn that we're actually safe and send messages to the body of safety rather than danger. And it makes me want to take a deep breath because it's helpful to remember that, right? Because sometimes we think, man, we're just this like one big ball of anxiety and trauma and my body's a mess. And how can I ever crawl out of this? That, with certain tools, and for me personally, and I've done all the tools, I have a degree in psychology, I've had therapy for many, many years. Like I've done all the things. This has been the most efficient, effective, not just in the moment care, which is really, really helpful. And the hardest part is hitting play when you're in an argument with someone. Step in the other room and hit play on a track, kind of release that emotional response and get your brain turned back on. But also for long-term care and for digging into those decades of, kind of like what you said, Amanda, those decades of patterns that we've learned and how we relate to ourselves and the world around us. And, our brain that's gone, well, this is how we've survived all these years. So these are the strategies that we need to implement in order to keep surviving. We can use these tools to start exploring new ways of relating to the world around us. And our subconscious mind needs to feel open to new thoughts and new beliefs. I always say, like, we can power pose and affirmation our way all day, every day. But if our subconscious brain is going, yeah, but I don't actually believe those things,
Right.
then you're just creating more conflict within yourself. So it's very efficient. It speaks directly, the audio tracks speak directly to the subconscious mind. And we have seen now hundreds of people's lives changed using these tools in combination with the functional tools, and of course, learning better and healthy habits. But a lot of times people come to us so overwhelmed that the thought of making any change, or the thought of, any kind of habit change, is just too overwhelming. That's where these tools can allow us to go, oh, maybe there's a different way. Maybe I don't have to, maybe I don't have to approach weight loss with, endless hours of beating myself up in the gym. Maybe there's a different way. Beliefs
Yeah.
are really powerful, and being able to change those beliefs on a subconscious level using efficient audio tracks has been game changing, at least for me personally in my journey. And then, of course, with the clients that we work with, it's pretty cool to see.
Right. Yeah, that sounds incredible. I've never heard of it before, but it sounds like I'm doing something kind of similar, because I kind
Yeah,
of pieced together a bunch of different modalities that I tried as well.
awesome.
And I feel like even free stuff online, like Joe Dispenza's work and Irene
Yes,
Lyon's work,
absolutely.
even just starting there is helpful.
100%.
But
Irene Lyon's YouTube channel is a wonderful
oh
resource
yeah,
of
she's the
all sorts
best.
of stuff. Yes, yes.
But what you said is definitely accurate. It's not like when you see like somebody having a shaking, crying episode and they're like, all right, I healed my trauma. It's every day practicing, maybe listening to this audio track or doing a
Yeah,
certain type of technique that has this structure. And because we have these trauma networks in our brain,
yep,
and it's not just like, here's the trauma memory over here, and then I love myself and everything's fine over here. These things are all interconnected, and the tracks and
yes.
triggers all can get into that trauma network. So the more you practice it, the more you like starting like, well, you wouldn't start brushing your hair at the very top, right? We have to kind of start at the bottom and get closer and
Yes.
closer.
It's so true. And you're even like kind of saying the same thing. I always say we have to start pulling at the thread slowly.
Yeah.
It's like the knot in your
Right.
hair. Like, we got to slowly pull out the threads, to unwind the knot.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens quickly too, which is really cool. It's sort of like, once we're on the right track, literally and figuratively, right? Once we're on the right path and we start finding these threads and we start connecting the dots, and we go, oh yeah, oh my gosh. And I think the coolest thing to witness is when, we'll do a track on something very specific, and especially at the Gut Health Agency, like with food reintroduction, like, okay, when was the last time you ate gluten? What actually happened in your body? Let's go back to that time. Imagine you're sitting in the restaurant, you're relive that moment doing the track, and really tap into the emotions. So I think this is also important to know, that you don't have to remember all the details of your trauma in order to heal from it. We don't
Mm-hmm.
expect you to be re-traumatized. And if you can just tap into the palpitation of your heart, the sweaty palms, and the feeling that you're feeling right now, that's all that you need. Like, we don't need all the nitty-gritty details. Details can be helpful in certain contexts, right? Like when it comes to food reintroduction, it can be helpful, because it's probably not going to re-trigger you to go back to that memory and, sit in a restaurant. But if there's something more serious that you're working on, then you don't have to necessarily remember all of that, because the body keeps the score. Your body
Right.
remembers all the things. So if you can tap into the emotions, fear, disgust is a really cool emotion that I've learned about recently, that I never had a word for, but it's a really powerful one, especially when it comes to like healing parental relationships, in particular mother-daughter relationships. The disgust emotion is very interesting. But if you can, yeah, if you can tap into those feelings, then you can rewire and heal that trauma very quickly and very easily. And it's really cool to see, once we start focusing on that one moment or that one feeling, all the other memories that start to pop up. And it's always very interesting to talk about that and digest it after a session, because I think, wow, I had this random memory that popped up. Oh, it's probably not random.
Yeah.
Right? Like the brain categorizes memories into folders of emotions. So if you have all these different memories that are packed into these folders of fear and disgust and shame and guilt and anger and sadness, then going into your folder of sadness and healing all those moments where you felt that same emotion is going to help you rewire in the future when you feel that emotion again to perceive safety within that emotion. So it's not about numbing the emotions, it's not about making the trauma okay. I think that's also really important to know. Like, this isn't about having to forgive a perpetrator. It's not at all what it's about. Or it's really just about turning your cognitive brain back online, in relation to that memory in that moment, and going, okay, I'm safe now.
Mhm.
And in future moments where you might feel re-triggered, like the next time you go to eat a sandwich, if one time you had a bad experience with gluten, you're perceiving that sandwich as safe now, right? It doesn't mean that the situation that happened wasn't embarrassing, but it does mean that we can do it a different way moving forward. And I think that's the most powerful, awesome piece of it.
Yes. Yes. Very well said. So this has been such a delightful conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. Tell people where to find you and what your signature programs are. How can they work with you?
Definitely. So I'm on Instagram, Your Gutsy Gal. You can also find Gut Health Agency, whichever one is easier to remember. Gut Health Agency, we have an account over there as well. And then our website is theguthealthagency.com. And we've got our VIP program, which is the Shangri-La. It's a 6-month program. If you come to me saying you're having some specific symptoms, I'll probably just say, let's just stop wasting time and let's do the VIP program. But we also have a starter pack, which is really, really cool. It's 2 months. It's potent work. You get the GI map stool testing. You get all the subconscious work. It's kind of like a taste of the 6-month program. And depending on your results, you might only need 2 months. You might not need an entire 6-month program. So it's a great starter pack. It's a great place to start. It's a great place to go, okay. And I think emotionally for a lot of people too, 2 months is maybe a 2-month commitment is easier to digest than 6 months sometimes, depending on where you're at on the
But
journey. Yeah, exactly.
um,
And then lastly, the only program that's not on there yet, because I've been pregnant and haven't gotten myself to make a landing page yet, is our newest membership. So we have a new membership that we rolled out. And this is for the people who are like, I know my issues are rooted in my nervous system and my brain. And maybe the GI map stool testing, maybe you've already gone down the functional route before. Maybe you've already spent thousands of dollars with a naturopathic doctor. Maybe you're kind of just burnt out and over the protocol situation, and you're like, I've got all those things down. I've got a supplement graveyard sitting in the bathroom, and I don't want to go down that path again. But I know that my missing link is the subconscious, healing my traumas, diving into all that we discussed today. The membership is for you. It's only $247 a month. It is a 6-month commitment, just because, showing up regularly for a certain period of time is going to reap you the most benefits. We meet weekly. We do the work together as a group. You get one-on-one support in the form of journal entries, and you can journal not just food, but your feelings and everything that you're experiencing. We've got a team of health coaches and dietitians on the back end who are going to be giving you that one-on-one support and supporting you along the way. And you get access to our signature programs. So there is the gut healing aspect of it on the back end. So you're going to have learning modules, and you're going to be able to kind of connect the dots on, again, that like sort of zoomed out perspective of gut health. Like, what does this actually mean to look at how am I eating versus what am I eating? And, getting curious about, again, how you relate to yourself and the world around you, and how your digestive system is reacting to all of those things. You get access to all that. So this was the trying to find the answer for all the people that are really just wanting to heal their nervous system and have really potent tools to do it in a really short period of time, is our membership. So You can DM me on Instagram. I can send you the link for that. It's very old school right now.
Okay.
And Your Gutsy Gal on Instagram. It's me that I run my account. If you pop me a DM there, I can send you the link to join the membership.
Okay. Yeah, we can put it in the show notes too.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. This has been so great.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you so much for being on. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thanks.
Ciao.
Thank you, everyone. I am just so thrilled that you're listening to the Healer Revolution podcast. This has been a huge passion project for me and super therapeutic on top of that, helping me to use my voice and connect with other like-minded individuals. So if you're enjoying the podcast, please like and subscribe. Please share on social media or with your audience or friends or loved ones. I truly appreciate it. It does take a lot of time and financial costs to run the podcast, and it is not a moneymaker, let me tell you. So if you are enjoying this, I would truly appreciate your support just by sending me a post, a like, and a subscribe. Thank you so much.